Wczesny poranek, ale nie ma co zwlekać, nie ma co czekać. Trzeba działać, panie i panowie. Witam was wszystkich serdecznie. A dzisiaj bardzo ciekawy temat, bo porozmawiamy o właśnie kontrowersjach właśnie związanych z Mister Olympia, a właściwie dowiemy się w końcu, dlaczego które miejsce zajął odpowiedni zawodnik, dlaczego Derek wygrał, dlaczego Hadi nie, dlaczego Andrew był dopiero trzeci, mimo że wielu zawodników i wielu ludzi miało go wyżej, dlaczego Samson spadł tak mocno. A skąd się dowiemy? Ponieważ materiał na ten temat nagrał nie kto inny jak Tyler Manion, czyli wiceprezydent całej ligi. Zanim do tego przejdziemy, zapraszam oczywiście do zostawienia subskrypcji, komentarza, łapki w górę. Zapraszam również na pozostałe social media, Instagram Davey92. A my zaczynamy i tutaj oczywiście będziemy na początku porównywać sobie miejsce pierwsze i drugie, a potem porozmawiamy o reszcie. Tak przynajmniej zaczął Tyler.
So first we'll start off with Derek and Hadi since they were first and second, and I think it was very close between the two, and then we'll move down the placing order. So we'll go pose by pose. First up is the front double bicep pose. This pose, along with quite a few other poses, I think are pretty close when it comes to deciding who wins the pose. In the front double bicep, for Derek, obviously he has great taper, a nice small waist. For Derek, his legs were definitely up in size. He definitely kept his leg size for this show. You see nice deep lines in the
Okay. Tutaj mówi, że widzimy bardzo fajne linie i głęboką separację. Niestety my na tym filmiku tego nie widzimy. Może on to widział na żywo, może widzieli to ludzie na żywo, ponieważ jakość tego filmu pokazuje w 100%, że Hadi miał większe, lepsze detale. To każdy, kto to widzi, każdy to powie. Już nie mówiąc o Andrew, który ma nawet prążki na czwórkach bokiem przy słabszej jakości, ale co muszę pochwalić, w końcu tło było troszeczkę ciemniejsze, chociaż moim zdaniem powinno być czarne, bo te mazieje na środku po prostu przeszkadzały,
separation throughout his legs. You see good leg width from the front, and he just held on to more volume in his legs. Obviously, a weakness for Derek in this pose is his inner arms don't really have.
No i powiedział, że tutaj Derek utrzymał rozmiar tych nóg, szczególnie po bokach. No a słabości to jego cała tutaj górna część.
Much detail, and obviously he doesn't really have much of a bicep peak. Now we move over to Hadi. Again, Hadi and Derek are built very similarly. So you see, again, a very nice taper into a nice small waist, the flaring lats. Hadi is very conditioned. You go down to the lower body, and the legs are very conditioned, but you see that the legs definitely do not have the same size as Derek's. They're separated.
I oczywiście ta prawa noga Hadiego, która jest dużo mniejsza, ale ta poza nazywa się bicepsy przodem. Nie możemy dać pozy bicepsy przodem dla kogoś, kto nie ma bicepsów przodem. To jest proste. Oczywiście patrzymy na całą pozę, od góry do dołu, od dołu do góry, od boku do boku, ale bicepsy przodem. Jeżeli ktoś nie ma bicepsów, nie możemy mówić, że tę pozę wygrywa. Już szczerze, gdyby Taylor chciał, żeby to troszeczkę lepiej zabrzmiało, niech powie, że wygrał ją Andrew. A Derek był na przykład trzeci w tej pozie. Bo patrząc na to, zobaczcie, że Andrew wygląda najlepiej w tej pozie. Kropka.
They're definitely conditioned, and then you just don't see that same leg width throughout the legs and the quads, and also the same sweep. I would say that Hadi also has a little bit less sweep on the right side than the left. It was pretty evident that it was a little bit imbalanced between those two legs, but overall the leg size just was not the same as Derek's. Bicep-wise and inner arm detail, he obviously has much better bicep peaks and more detail in the biceps. So as you can see, it's a very close pose. They both have that very nice taper. When it comes to the arms, Hadi has the better arms. When it comes to the legs, Derek has the better legs. Separation through the legs, Derek has a little bit better separation than the legs and obviously a little bit better size. Hadi's conditioning of the muscles themselves are a little bit better. The feathering was there. Throughout the upper body, I would say that Hadi was a little bit more conditioned with a little bit more detail overall as well. But obviously Derek was in shape here and still conditioned too. For me, because of the overall size, really, I think there's a little bit of a size difference overall. I gave this pose to Derek by a hair to make it one pose to 0.
Ułamkiem albo o rzut włosa, o rozmiar włosa, to pozę wygrywa Derek pomiędzy Derekiem a Hadim. Okej, możemy z tą nogą dyskutować, ale...
Next up is the front lat spread pose. For both these guys...
Ja nie jestem po prostu za tym, żeby Derek wygrał tą pozę. W sensie bicepsy przodem. Po prostu nie. No ale porównuję pierwszego do drugiego tylko i wyłącznie. I tak jak mówię, jakość tego nagrania nie pokazuje na pewno tego, jak Hadi wygląda również na żywo, bo Hadi podobno nie ma skóry na żywo. I podobno to, co Andrew pokazał, to, czego mu brakowało z tego, co słuchałem, to pewności siebie na początku, jak wyszedł. Że on wyszedł na początku na scenę i było takie, był troszeczkę wolny, troszeczkę taki zamyślony, a tutaj akurat właśnie, no, widać po tej pozie bicepsy przodu, którą przed chwilą omawialiśmy, że no, Derek nie był na pewno pierwszy, przynajmniej w oczach wielu.
Guys, I don't think it's their strongest pose. It's not weak by any means, but I don't think it is their strongest pose. So first with Derek, you can see that actually the size and the detail on his outer arms are much, much better than what his inner arm looks like when they're raised up for the front double. He had good volume and cap to his delts. Chest-wise, his chest lacks, you know, some of that striation and detail. I think it looks thicker in some poses than others. You can see really just a touch of thickness, especially through the lower pecs in this pose, but he definitely could use more thickness and more of that detail and striation throughout the upper pec and whole entire chest as a whole. Again, he has very, very wide lats going down into a nice small waist. He does have detail in the midsection throughout the abs, and then like I stated about his legs before, the legs were solid here. We move over to Hadi. For me, Hadi's chest is actually even flatter than Derek's. What I mean by this is
tutaj Derek był pełny, Hadi widać, że jest po prostu płaski, jeżeli chodzi o ten rejon klatki i barków. Te pozy wygrywa Andrew tutaj w 100%, nawet nie ma dyskusji. Drugi jest Samson, trzeci Derek, czwarty Hadi. Ja bym tak to miał, bo jakby nie patrzeć, nawet mniejszy Samson wygląda w niej bardzo, bardzo klasycznie, jak figurka. Po prostu to nie jest poza małych ludzi, wprost mówiąc. Jak patrzycie na małych ludzi, którzy robią najszerszy przodem, zawsze wyglądają gorzej. Nick, nawet Damian Kryszpin od nas, to jest jego najgorsza poza. Jak patrzę na wszystkich niższych u nas zawodników, to najszerszy przodem jest ich najgorszą pozą, a na przykład bicepsy przodem są fenomenalną pozą u nich.
the muscle itself doesn't look as thick. You don't really see the thickness there. His chest is obviously a little bit more separated, but it doesn't have that same separation and striation and detail that you see in his chest in some of these other poses. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, I actually think Derek in this pose his outer arms have more volume and more mass to them than Hadi's. Derek's shoulders also have more volume and mass to them than Hadi's as well. Hadi's shoulders are a little bit flat. You can see the shape of the shoulders here. It's just not the same as Derek's. But again, he has very wide lats going in down into a nice small waist. He definitely has detail throughout the abs and the midsection. And then again, his lower body is conditioned, but the lower body is not the same as Derek's. So because I think the outer arms and shoulders...
Nie, akurat te pozy w 100% Derek nad Hadim, tutaj nie mamy co nawet dyskutować, to widać. Po prostu no, brakuje tutaj Hadiemu pełności. No i to mówię, to jest chyba jego najgorsza poza z wszystkich. Za to pozy bokiem, jeżeli chodzi o niskich zawodników, no to Damian wygląda jak mięsień na mięsień na mięśniu. I tutaj tak samo.
In the chest, how it all flows on Derek compared to Hadi, I think Derek is better there, plus Derek's advantage in the legs. I gave this pose to Derek to make it 2 poses to 0. Next up is the side chest pose. For Derek here again, you can see his outer arms and shoulders are actually not bad at all. So for arms being, you know, a weakness for him when they're raised, whenever they're in these side poses, they actually look very, very solid. I mean, just compare it to Hadi's right here. Again, Derek's shoulder, I think, is better than Hadi's shoulder. Derek's outer arms have a little bit more of that volume and roundness. Hadi has a little bit more of that peak to the bicep.
I co mnie zdziwiło, ale tą pozę szczerze dałbym też Derekowi. Zobaczcie różnicę w czwórkach. Zobaczcie różnicę ogólnie w pełności tutaj, no tu wiadomo, skosy u Hadiego są fenomenalne. Nikt nie ma lepszych skosów i ogólnie chyba mięśni brzucha samych w sobie niż Hadi w całej lidze. Ale jak popatrzycie, to strasznie tutaj pełności brakowało. Tutaj szczególnie widzicie nawet ramiona, które u Dereka są najgorszym punktem, wyglądają lepiej rozmiarowo. Są po prostu napakowane tutaj wszędzie, tutaj jest mięso, widzicie? A tutaj jeżeli chodzi o nogę, to zupełnie jest no, niesamowita różnica.
Here, so all things considered, they're very similar. I think width throughout the top from shoulder to shoulder, meaning shoulder throughout the chest to the back shoulder, I think Derek is wider. I also think that actually Derek's chest is thicker than Hadi's. You can see that chest flatness here, and even with the back pec that's pushed over, you can see Derek's is thicker than Hadi's as well. They both keep their midsections tight, go down into the lower body, and you see that Hadi's legs are a little bit smaller than Derek's. They both have very good separation and detail to them, but you just see more of that density and mass to Derek's leg, and obviously they're both in very good condition. So for me, again, because of where Derek beats Hadi in this pose, especially throughout, you know, actually both the upper and the lower body for me, I thought this was a pretty clear pose to Derek to make it 3 poses to 0. Next up is the back double bicep pose. Obviously we know Derek has a very...
No to jest najlepsza poza Dereka. Tutaj Derek po prostu dominuje, także sądzę, że będzie 4-0 Derek tyłem wygląda wspaniale. Tyłem no to jest po prostu niebo a ziemia.
Very, very crazy back.
Też dziwne, że wiecie, przewracamy Dereka tak jakby jak kartę i rotujemy i mamy, jeżeli chodzi o górę ciała, dwie inne osoby.
Double bicep. His back itself is, ridiculous. He has very good depth and thickness to it. Very nice width into a nice small waist. I think his legs from the back looked pretty big. He kept really, I think, solid size on his legs this time around. You can see he has, obviously, the detail and illustration to the glutes and the hamstring, but you see that sweep from the quads that come into play to really accentuate the leg width here in Derek from the back. Shoulders solid from the back. Not the most overpowering, but solid. Again, arms here, you see he has solid tricep development, but the bicep peak in development could stand to be better. Now we move over to Hadi. Hadi's back itself compared to Derek. Hadi's back has good width. Doesn't quite match Derek's width, but the real difference here is the density to the back. As conditioned as Hadi is throughout the chest and the midsection from the front, you don't see that same conditioning in the back here. So it just doesn't have that depth and 3D look to it. Go down into the lower body, and again, you don't see that development in leg width or even hardness again to the legs.
Nie wiem jak wasze oczy, ale moje ciągle kierują się do Andrew. Te piki bicepsów. Nawet jeżeli nie ma tutaj najwięcej detali, ale no, po prostu statuetka.
In the lower body that you do in Derek's. So for me, I think this is a very clear pose for Derek. I think he exposes a lot of Hadi's weaknesses here to make it 4 poses to 0. Next up is the back lat spread pose. Now this is another pose that I think is very, very close. Why? Because again, the lower body difference, I think Derek has the advantage in the lower body here. However, when we move into the upper body, I think that Derek is not opening up every time that he hits this pose. So you can see the density and the thickness that Derek has to his back. Again, his triceps, rear delts, everything actually looks very solid here, but the back...
Nie wiem, czy zwróciliście jeszcze na jedną uwagę rzecz. Popatrzcie na ich skórę. Zobaczcie, jak u Andrew ładnie skóra wygląda. No, to jest też ważny element, moim zdaniem.
Itself, he's not opening it up.
Jeszcze jedno. Andrew stoi na linii, Samson stoi na linii, karły stoją przed linią.
To display the width that obviously he has. Hadi, on the other hand, does a very, very good job of opening up his back all the way, so you see thickness and density in detail throughout his back. Also, his lats look wider than Derek's in this pose, but he has the disadvantage in the lower body. Really, I think this is a very close pose because while Hadi's width is better, you still see that Derek has that thickness and 3D look, and Derek's lower body is overall better. But for me, I think this pose went back and forth a lot. It really all depended on how Derek was opening up the lats, and I ended up giving this pose to Hadi, definitely because of the width and how he opened up his back to make this 4 poses to 1. Next up, we're going to move into the side tricep pose. Again, here from the side, you see kind of a little bit more of the size difference between Derek and Hadi at this show. Really, in this pose, you can see, I think even a little bit more than the side chest, the difference in the size of their legs, the density of their legs. So I think Derek has a lower body advantage here. Now, when it comes...
No i tu możemy zobaczyć naprawdę dużą różnicę, jeżeli chodzi o rozmiar pomiędzy Derekiem a Hadim. To nawet nie będę... To po prostu wygląda pięknie. To nie ma się do czego doczepić.
To the upper body, again, I think that Derek...
I znowu, linia przed linią.
Chest is a little bit thicker than Hadi's.
Miało być gnębienie za wychodzenie przed linię. Nawet Andrew parę razy cofnął Dereka i Nika.
You can see Hadi's striations, though, a little bit more in this pose in the side chest and his backpack. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, again, I feel like the tricep development, the shoulders, just the outer arm in general is a little bit better on Derek's. Both their midsections are tight. They both have good abs, but Hadi's obviously, that's his one crazy advantage. He has that crazy obliques and ab detail. So for me in this pose, again, because of the lower body advantage and overall size and thickness and roundness, I gave this pose to Derek to make it 5 poses to 1.
Dobra, jeżeli ktoś dostaje 5 puz do 1 i teraz mamy 2 ostatnie pozy, czyli będzie 5 do 3, dlaczego wygrywa? To powinno być po prostu knockout. To powinno być 5 na liście. Dlaczego sędziowie tak bardzo się różnili myślami?
Next up is the abdominal and thigh pose. For Derek, I think he's definitely improved it.
No i tutaj, zobaczcie, wiemy film i tak dalej, ale zobaczcie jakość czwórek. Wiadomo, u Dereka są większe, ale jakość. Zobaczcie, o Andrew też widać wszystko dobrze. I znowu, tutaj to już jest chyba 2 metry przed linią. Kurwa jego mać, wprost powiem. Albo jesteśmy fair do każdego, albo pozwalamy niektórym kurwa na więcej.
This over time, you see now nice taper.
Jeżeli stanę przed Wami, uwierzcie mi, ja sędziowałem zawody i widziałem zawodników, którzy wychodzą przed linię. Jeżeli wyjdziesz przed linię pół metra, to ja mam Ciebie 2 razy większego. Ja siedzę od Ciebie 2 metry, widzę o tak, patrzę o tak, dosłownie. Widzę wszystko. Widzę nawet, jak Ci się fałdka na dupie odznacza. Jeżeli ktoś wyjdzie tak daleko jak Derek, dodaję mu to z 10 funtów.
Going down into his waist, we see much more ab development in detail than he previously showed. Arms overhead, arms are okay. Obviously, he doesn't have that detail and peak that others have. Go down into the lower body. Again, the legs, they held size and thickness and had good separation to them. However, when you move over to Hadi, this is always one of his strongest poses. This is one of his strengths, is his core and detail to the midsection. He has great taper, chest looks full. He has the biceps that are peaked, development good. Go down to the lower body, and even though his legs are down a little bit, you see the conditioning throughout. Overall, just the flow of the pose and the conditioning that gets brought out, especially...
Czekaj chwilę, to przed chwilą przecież nie widzieliśmy w pozach przodem docięcia takiego jak u Dereka, teraz widzimy?
Through the midsection. I thought this was a clear pose for Hadi to make it 5 poses to 2. Then lastly, we have the most muscular pose. Again, I felt like Derek has improved this pose. He still needs more of that thickness and striation and detail throughout the chest. However, outer arms and shoulders definitely look better. Legs kept the size, like I said, so everything holds for the lower body from the front that I said before. Even though Derek got better, you still go over to Hadi. Again, this shows off all of his strengths, the detail and conditioning throughout his chest, his midsection. Here, his chest, while it still isn't the thickest chest, it still is thick enough, and it shows the crazy detail and striations throughout the chest. His arms and shoulders tend to look a little bit better in this most muscular pose when he has his fists touching together like this. So the development in the outer arms and shoulders is there. Again, the legs are a little bit downsized, but you see the striations and conditioning throughout the legs. And again, just the overall polish and flow of this pose. It's very hard to take it off Hadi, and I thought it was a clear pose for Hadi to make it 5 poses to 3. Now, obviously, the scores were Derek won pre-judging 6-9. Hadi won finals 7-8. I felt like personally that Derek's conditioning from Friday to Saturday night, as the night moved on, his conditioning lessened on Saturday.
On po prostu zrobił się miękki. Im dalej szliśmy w wieczór, tym bardziej Derek stawał się miękki.
Next up, we had Andrew Jack in 3rd place. For me, I think this was by far Andrew's best look of his career. I was very...
Ja mam nadzieję, że Andrew wziął mydło, naprawdę. Bo tak kogoś wydymać.
Very impressed with what he brought to the stage.
Kurwa, im dłużej to oglądam, tym mi się smutno robi. Bo naprawdę Andrew wygląda przezajebiście. I zobaczcie znowu na tę cholerną linię. Jako jedyny trzyma się ustaleń.
This was definitely the most conditioned Andrew has ever been, while still keeping a lot of muscle on his frame. Obviously, he was pretty conditioned once before at the Arnold a couple of years ago, but he just lost too much of his muscle and looked a little bit stringy at that show. This was not the case here. For me, Andrew has some very, very strong poses, but also some weaker poses. That is the difference on what put him behind the top 2 guys. So for Andrew, I think his front double bicep is great. Obviously, his upper body is great in this pose. For the legs, I felt like this was the best that his legs actually look from the front when it comes to separation and detail to the quads, but also actually, in my opinion, the size and the leg width and what this...
No sorry, ale on wygląda, jakby przyszedł z dziećmi do przedszkola. Jakby wyprowadzał właśnie dzieciaki do przedszkola.
Space took up on stage. I still think he could use just slightly more leg width and size to those quads though from the front.
No mógłby mieć troszeczkę większe te czwórki, ale no Derek mógłby mieć troszeczkę więcej detali wszędzie.
Really complete the pose.
Sorry, że tak czasami sarkastycznie mówię, ale jak już się upierdalamy, to bądźmy szczerzy i tak samo cofnijmy tego Dereka.
But front double looked really, really good. His front lat spread, in my opinion, was the best out of the top 4. The 3D look and the width and everything that he displays in that front lat spread, the thickness to the chest, the detail, the outer arms and shoulders look great here. And even his legs, they just flow so well, I think, because of how good his upper body looks. So front lat spread, very, very strong. Moving to the side chest, while I think he's hitting the side chest better than he previously did, there still has got to be a way to tinker with this pose to make...
No w 100% się zgodzę z Taylorem. Tutaj akurat ta poza klatka bokiem strasznie dziwnie ją robi Andrew. Strasznie.
it look more comfortable for him, and obviously just to make it look more pleasing as well, because his upper body should look very, very dominant in this pose no matter what. Now you get to the lower body. Obviously this is where you see he needs more of that size to his legs, he needs more of that density, that thickness. He could use more obviously of that hamstring drop, but overall just density to these side legs as well. That's going to really make this pose stronger. So there's kind of issues with both the upper and the lower body here. That's what makes this a weaker pose, and he's obviously on the right track. He's continuing to improve it. I'm sure they're going to keep figuring out ways to improve it as well, to turn it into his strength. And I think once the upper or the lower body becomes very, very good, it can counteract whatever the weakness is. So on the right track here, but that's what's holding him back. And while we're on the side, might as well go into the side tricep. It's the same thing here. I think flexibility, if he got a little bit more flexible, can help with his arm placement, how he's reaching back and everything.
Flexible. Andrew, który robi szpagaty na scenie bardziej.
Everything else, because he's trying
Zobaczcie nogi Dereka, Hadiego, Samsona i Andrew.
to reach back so far. I think it's making his upper body twist in a direction, again, that makes his upper body, it's not displaying everything in the most pleasing manner. So we're not seeing the detail and, throughout his upper body. The midsection doesn't look it throughout the middle of his back. I still feel like he could just use a little bit more of that thickness and density back there, but overall was definitely impressed with how it came up. I just think, again, you just see it's behind those top two guys here. And again, the lower body, this is the first time that he was conditioned throughout his hamstring and his glutes and kept leg size from the back, but you see he just needs more leg width when comparing to all three of the other guys in the top four. He doesn't have that same leg width and that same leg density that they have. The back lat spread I thought was one of his most improved poses. He finally opened his back up all the way. He still displayed thickness and depth and detail to it in this back lat spread. Each other, they're in close. You see the thickness throughout the chest, the size and the peak of his arms, and the detail with the shoulders. His legs as well look good here. So again, Andrew brought a very impressive...
Czyli Andrew tak naprawdę brakuje trochę mięsa. Tak wprost mówiąc, w boku czwórek, troszeczkę ogólnie na nogach, co poprawia, tylko Andrew ma ponad 40 lat. Mam nadzieję, że czasu mu starczy. I tutaj to jeszcze, co chcieliśmy.
Have enough. I think really to get discouraged about. I think he can rebound very quickly from this, and I think...
No i tak jak tutaj w 100% z Taylorem się zgadzam, że tak, Samson po prostu to był błąd w Peak Weeku i było to widać 3 dni przed, gdy wstawił firmę, miałem takie wygrał, a potem nagle
2026 still looks as bright as ever for him. Next up in 5th, we had Martin Fitzwater. For me, Martin made sure he came in very, very conditioned at this show, which obviously normally is a good look for him, and I still thought was a very solid look for him. But I think, again, he's another guy that, while doing this, I think he lost just a touch too much of his size to do this. You could see, for me at least, his legs from the front, you just didn't have that same width and that same size that he normally has, and I think that affected with how he looked from the front a little bit. For Martin too, obviously, one of the main things is he can improve is his back. He can still improve that thickness and depth to his back, and obviously the width as well. I think in the back double and the back lat spread, he can improve the thickness and the width there. That's going to start making him look stronger in those back poses. It's also going to help him from the front as well. I think the front double he looks great in. His taper is great, but when it comes to the front lat spread, you can see he can't quite get those lats out.
Czyli Martin potracił za dużo mięsa, ale interesuje mnie, czy będzie cokolwiek o Niku.
For Martin, it's just, can he bring in conditioning that's like this or basically almost on par with it while still keeping a little bit more volume as well. So a little bit of a similar boat as Samson, except for Martin, when he's in the condition, you see that separation, that he has that kind of gnarly conditioning. It's just, can he add that little bit more volume back so he can hang with the guys that are a little bit bigger than him. Next up in 6, we had Nick. I think Nick's condition, this condition wasn't really bad, but he just wasn't really on. And when I say on, like everything was a little bit flat for him. He didn't really have the greatest pop to his physique. I think the main issue for Nick was his waist just appeared very wide, I would say, on stage. He did a better job of keeping his midsection controlled for sure, but the waist just seemed very wide in a lot of the poses, especially when you're looking at him from the front.
No tak, jeżeli czwórki mu poleciały, to od razu talia wygląda na o wiele szerszą.
Front double and the front lat spread, even the ab and thigh, just he has deep ab.
I znowu może mogliście zobaczyć, że patrzcie, u osoby, która jest niższa, zobaczcie, wszyscy tutaj są niżsi, oprócz Tonio. Tonio też jest dość niski, tylko że ma talię węższą o wiele, ale i tak u niego nie wygląda najszerszy przodem dobrze, u żadnego z nich.
Just he has deep abs and deeply separated abs, but the waist just looked really thick. And even when he was doing his most muscular, which is still a very strong pose, you can see that that waistline just wasn't coming in as much as it has in the past. Even as recently as Pittsburgh, I thought that waistline was definitely tighter. So his back double bicep was great. His back lat spread is great. You can see he definitely improved both these poses again. They're very, very strong poses. His legs look great from the back and have that amount of density and muscle. But when it comes to Nick, he just really has to work on bringing in that midsection and having.
Czyli unika to co zwykle. Talia. Talia, 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 talia. Mam nadzieję, że Wam się podobało. Zostawcie oczywiście to, co wszystko dobre. Zapraszam Was również do używania kodów, czyli BioLab LV, kod Davik. Macie tam wszystkie peptydy, jochimbinę, MK, Endurobol, czyli kardarynę i tak dalej, pozostałe spalacze. A jeżeli chodzi o suplementy, to KFD.pl z kodem Davik. Zapraszam Was serdecznie. Widzicie, jak ocenił to prezydent, wiceprezydent ligi i sami dajcie znać, co o tym myślicie. Pozdro.